Hi everyone, my name is Ron Torres and I've been asked by Bryant and Stratton College to put together this brief video on the best practices for engaging online students. So let's start out together by defining what it means to engage online students. Let's start by saying that we need to go beyond the college's basic requirements, and that's a theme that you're going to see carried through each of the other elements of engaging online students. As instructors, well, we have to get to know our students. We have to be accessible and respond in a timely manner. We have to provide substantive feedback and positive critique. Being online, we have to know our classroom mechanics. And probably most importantly, we need to inject some fun into the classroom. So let's dive right in and talk a little bit about going beyond the college's requirements. Now, the design of each course supports the basic interaction to engage students in active learning. But it's a lot like that ice cream cone there. It's only got one flavor, and it's vanilla. What I hope to do by the end of this video is to show you some techniques and some examples of how we can go beyond the college's requirements and add flavor to each of our classrooms. Let's dive into that with the topic of getting to know your students. And we can begin right in week 1 by leveraging our icebreaker. Now, student introductions are mandatory in week 1, and we're required to personally respond to each student. But we can go beyond those basic requirements and capture keywords, phrases of interest, disabilities, hardship, and identify potential problems. And we can do that by managing our own personal class roster or grading sheet where we capture the student names and all of those things we identified earlier. Now, part of getting to know your students is to put them at ease and create that welcoming, safe learning environment. A large part of that has to do with laying out the ground rules, but doing so in a manner that doesn't cause students to cringe at the thought of needing to contact you. Now, part of our requirements from the college are to post in our supplemental syllabus our teaching approach, our late policy, and our virtual office hours. And all of these are reinforced as part of the introductory folder quiz right there in week 1. And going beyond the college requirements, I like to leverage the icebreaker discussion and be sure to welcome each student to class, add a personal note, and a follow-up question on the subject matter. Let's have them dive right into the topic. And then I conclude if you ever have any questions, and I reinforce my contact information. Now, another part of engaging students is to be accessible. And by design, we're required to have a virtual office hour. And the college also has the requirement that we be active in our classroom and provide a teaching presence over or at least 5 days a week. And the way I like to do that is, well, actually every day I go through a system of bringing them down to zeros, I call it. And I'll start with my email inbox. If students have reached out to me, I'll respond to those emails. I'll then move on to the question forum in my particular classroom. Then I'll move on to the discussion forum that's active for that week. And the last thing I'll go after are the different activities, and I'll bring those down to 0 as well. And today, being accessible means configuring your Outlook mail to work with your smartphone. And this can alleviate a multitude of student frustrations. Even if you can't get back to them with a specific answer to their question, you can always get back to them and set an expectation for when you will address their specific question. And that helps students a great deal. And that'll move us into our next topic about providing feedback. To be valuable, feedback must be timely, and we're asked to respond to questions, whether they're in a discussion forum or email, within 24 to 48 hours, and that grades are due the Thursday after the grading period. Now, with that bring them down to zeros technique that I demonstrated in the previous slide, well, I'm doing just that. I'm responding quickly and often completing grades long before that Thursday after a grading period. Our feedback must also be substantive, and for that, let's use our rubrics. There we have clearly defined standards. And what I like to do is teach my students how to evaluate their own work using these rubrics before they submit it. That way they know what my expectations are of their performance. And here's another opportunity to use your personalized grading sheets to make your feedback that much more relevant by putting it in the context of their target career or their current interests. And lastly, our feedback still needs to be positive, and for that I'll go back to the Oreo cookie approach, starting out with something positive, adding the negative or the corrections that need to happen, and then finishing off with something even more positive. It's a great approach. Now, providing feedback is one topic, but I like to go beyond the college's expectations and be proactive and try to avoid known issues. Two of the things I like to do are to load my discussion forums with homework help and my question forums with FAQs that are specific for either the week or the class. Now this way, students can often find the answers to their questions right there in the classroom. And another thing we can do as instructors is in our learning management systems, we can find the calendar functionality and load that up with the dates of our assignments and descriptions from the tracking calendar and supplemental syllabus. Anything we can possibly do to help students with time management, well, that's certainly welcome. Let's move on to our next topic about knowing our classroom mechanics. One thing that's common to most learning management systems are something called announcements. Now these are postings that we can add to our course landing page that inform students of important information or reminders for the week. But announcements by their nature are passive. We know we can post them to the landing page, but we don't know if a student has actually read them. A similar mechanism in learning management systems are something known as alerts or messages. Now these contain the same types of notes that we post in our announcements. But the primary difference is that students must acknowledge these either by selecting the OK button or a click to continue so that we know that they've actually read the material. Now the last topic we're going to touch upon, and probably the most important, is to have fun in our classrooms. And let's start with something very easy, simply being social. Load up your discussion forums with maybe a social posting or two. One that I like to ask is simply, what's your favorite movie? Now, not all students will participate, but you're offering some students an opportunity to have fun and be social. Now, being online, we have a lot of competition from a lot of other websites, and text can be boring. So to have fun, introduce graphics and even more graphics. Let me show you how I do that in my classrooms. The first example, well, that's what you're doing right now. You're reviewing a video, and I'll create YouTube videos for each week of my class. Welcome to Week X. And there I'll introduce the different topics and the different assignments to make sure that things are clear for my more visual learners. And look around your classroom for opportunity to introduce JPEGs and bitmaps. Look at these boring discussion headers. In the first weeks of a course, I'll ask students to send me mugshots and pictures of themselves, and I'll incorporate those all around the classroom right here in the discussion headers. And I reuse all the pictures that my students send me, along with an animated GIF tool, in order to create a class gallery that I'll post in the About This section portion of my classroom. Let's face it, students like all of us like to see themselves. Now, with all of these different mechanisms, I advise you to get some of your own feedback. And I do this with a Week 3 non-graded course content survey that I ask all my students, and here's an example of the kinds of questions that I ask and the responses that I get back from them. I know that the course materials are clear, but that not everybody wants to partake in pictures in creating a more social environment. I know that a majority of the class is getting some benefit out of the videos and helping them understand the course and the various topics. and that even with all of my efforts around the course calendar, a number of students are still not using it. I know that these additional discussion postings are contributing to their learning, and that all those additional topics are a good way for them to participate and learn. And I'm sure this percentage went up after week 3, but at that time, not many of the students had used the homework help discussion thread. I also find that students believe me to be responsive to their additional questions, and then I ask them something reflective, and nearly half the class believe they should be more active. So a survey like this helps me understand what's effective and how to tune my different mechanisms. So let's finish this video where we started, our desire to engage online students. It's all about adding additional flavors to our classroom to achieve specific results. So the college does a great job of setting up the basic requirements, but we need to go beyond those. We need to go beyond those in the areas of getting to know our students. To engage students, we need to be accessible and respond in a timely manner. We need to provide substantive feedback and give positive critique. To facilitate all of these, we have to know our classroom mechanics. And lastly, and most importantly, we need to create a social environment and inject some fun into each of our classrooms. Well, I'd like to thank you all for spending this time with me and learning a few of the best practices of engaging our online students. Thank you.